What are the most important issues in this presidential campaign?
The 2012 presidential election is going to be fought out over three issues: jobs, jobs, and jobs. Now, it's going to be a little bit more complicated than that because it's the state of the economy, the future of the country, the role of government, the size of our debt, the amount of spending, and particularly the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare as it's colloquially known. All those will be part of that issue, but it's going to be largely based on the economy.
And on jobs and the economy, how could a Republican do better than President Obama?
Well, first, it's going to be important for the critique of the president to be based on what the president himself has said, the benchmarks for both economic growth and for job creation and for health care that he laid out. So there's got to be a reasoned, sensible critique that says he said this would happen and it hasn't. And then the Republicans have to pivot to a proactive agenda that says here's what we'll do to confront these things. We must put our fiscal house in order. We must cut unnecessary regulation. We must make our tax code competitive by washing out all the special privileges and lowering the rates. We must do things to encourage American companies to bring their foreign profits back to the United States to invest. And we must focus on sustained economic growth and prosperity for the country. They must also lay out an agenda not simply to repeal Obamacare, but to replace it with sensible pieces of legislation like allowing small businesses to pool their risk, allowing people to purchase health insurance across state lines, reducing junk and frivolous lawsuits, getting more transparency in price and outcomes, allowing people to save more tax-free for their out-of-pocket medical expenses, and maybe even going so far as, I believe this strongly, changing the tax code so the tax advantage of providing health insurance goes to the individual as well as to the company, which makes health insurance truly portable so people can take their benefits with them from job to job and not be stuck in a job they hate for fear of losing their health insurance coverage.
If the next president is Republican, what can states look forward to?
First, I think there would be a rollback of sort of federal mandates and regulations. There's a real sense, particularly in Congress today on the Republican side in the House, which I think would be reflected in a Republican Senate, Republican president, that the federal government is doing too much to dictate to states and localities, and the state and local governments ought to be freed of constraints. We'd also, in all likelihood, Republican President, Republican Congress see an end to Obamacare's requirement that states expand Medicaid, which is already drowning state budgets, and would simply spike the economic fate of a lot of states in the union if left unchanged.
In a nutshell, why don't you think the president should be reelected?
The president led us to believe that he would govern from the center and adopt centrist answers to the question of jobs and the economy and health care, and he is not. He's governed from the left, and we have demonstrated over the last 3 years we can't spend our way to prosperity, and that turning over health care to the federal government is not going to resolve the problems that we have. The president has failed. His policies have not moved the country forward, and we cannot afford 4 more years of rapidly spiraling spending and an equally rapidly spiraling debt.
In your opinion, what qualities make a great leader?
In a president, as opposed to a legislator, because they are different talents, but a president has to have a clear vision of what they're willing to do and where they want to take the country. They have to have a willingness to get their hands dirty, to literally get in and work to get that done. A willingness to compromise within reason in order to bring people together. Remember, Bush, for example, got elected in 2000 in a highly contentious election, and yet by June of 2000, a Democrat Senate had approved his tax cuts. And why? Because the president got involved in fashioning a compromise with Democrats that allowed a quarter of the Democrats in the Senate to vote for the president's tax cut. And so you have to be willing to get things done. You need to be focused on being president more than you are a political leader. I mean, the president has several responsibilities: a diplomat and chief, commander in chief, chief executive, leader of his party, congressional negotiator. The least of those ought to be his party function, and the most ought to be to focus on the demands of the job. I think a president also has to be able to surround himself with people who say no, because the job is enormously. The post is enormously intimidating to people, and it's people who, I used to office a few paces from the Oval Office, and people would say, by God, the president needs to hear from me on why this is all being screwed up. And you'd say, well, great, he's got a little time on his schedule, let's walk in and see him, and you'd walk into the Oval Office and they'd say, God, you're looking pretty today, and all those tough words that they wanted to say would have, drained away. So a president needs to fashion a a decision-making structure in which he hears a wide range of opinions, some of them unpleasant, and is surrounded by people who can say, Mr. President, with all due respect, I think that's a wrong course of action.
And what about a legislator?
A legislator has got to have the ability, like a president, to do their homework. With a legislator, it is to do their homework on representing their constituents and also the subject matter in which their committee assignments give them, and to think creatively ahead, past the demands of the moment to the long-term needs of their state, and become subject matter experts in those areas and fashion innovative answers to those challenges, and to be constantly thinking about, what's the next thing that's coming here so that I can understand it better and be able to fashion the policies to meet that challenge.
And then finally, in Congress, do you think ideology and politics are putting the nation at risk?
I think ideology is not. I think politics is. We've always had strongly ideological figures in Congress. Ted Kennedy, for example, and Barry Goldwater, from just two examples. But people in Congress have been willing to put the politics aside for the moment and try and fashion some reasonable compromise, obviously dominated by the majority party, but with respect to the minority party. And this happens a lot more than people are willing to give credit for, but particularly in the last 3 years, the tone that the president has said have made this more difficult. When the president in early 2009 received a delegation from the Republicans in Congress who wanted to make recommendations about items to go in the stimulus bill, and he cut them off by saying, I won, basically, shut up, I won, sit down. This set a bad tone, and this tone has continued. And a president has to be open to, and legislators have to be open to, reasonable compromises, recognizing the ideological constraints of their party and the nature of the system.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Appreciate it.